messages. So I guess, who knows? I don't know if it was worse.
So I see we have Dorothea on the line, so I'm gonna go ahead and hit record.
All right,
Good.
that sounds good. I think we're formally call the meeting to order and start by taking the roll. Dorothea, are you connected to audio?
Yes, I am.
Oh, fabulous. All right, we'll go around. Nancy Cromie,
Here.
Kathy Montgomery,
Here.
Dorothea Ferris,
Yes.
and Jason James is also present. So we have a quorum. Susanna, do you want to take it from here? I think we need to look at minutes.
Yeah, and I'm going to institute a new kind of process for this because they're technically not minutes. I labeled them as notes from the meeting, and they're intended just to be kind of refresher of the conversation. So I think there's no need to approve them because there wouldn't be any changes. So I think that I will just distribute these for the informational purposes and not bother making it a formal agenda item in the future.
Okay.
So if you're all okay with that, I think that would be our process going forward.
I'm comfortable with that and appreciate the notes that you distributed today. I looked those over and it looked like a good record to me.
Okay, good.
Yep.
Yeah, it's hard to kind of not get bogged down in too much conversation, but to get the key points on the paper. Okay, so our only other piece of business is election of officers. And so I will let you guys kind of figure out how you want to proceed with that.
I don't know how to proceed with that, but you know, we definitely need to talk about how to get some other members on this board. That's pretty key in my mind, as we all would think that. But I had spoken to a couple key people in the community about 6 months ago when this came up, and they both, one was Lisa Dupre and one was Chrissy Strom, and they both looked at it really hard and they both declined. So I don't have any new names right now, but Kathy and Jason, maybe you guys do, or Dorothea might have an idea. But we got to do something.
And Dorothea's term, I believe, is officially up at the end of this month. So then she will be retired unless she decides to reapply.
I know they have looked for a long time for members for the committee, and you know, Pitkin County has done the best it can do for getting information out. And I think it really needs to be a discussion in the Redstone community.
Sure.
And how to go about that, I don't know the best. I wish I had a good suggestion.
Yeah.
But
Kathy, do you have any ideas?
I actually talked to a neighbor a while back, but she ended up moving to New Mexico for part of the year to go back to her old job. So she's not here right now. She still owns her house in our neighborhood, but I thought she would be a good fit, but
Yeah.
that's not going to work right now.
Yeah.
We might need to look at our bylaws and see if there are things that we can change like that. I know we had one applicant last year who had to withdraw because they didn't meet the residency requirement. And I don't know if that person has been approached again or has any interest. So I think it's kind of a twofold thing that we should maybe make it a little easier for people to serve, particularly if we're going to do more, you know, we're going to have a combination, I hope, of Zoom and in-person meetings. That might make things easier for people to participate. So that's something that we should consider talking about it, you know, at length going forward.
Yeah.
But if you want to keep our current slate of officers, that's Nancy as the vice chair and Jason as the chair. And someone could just make a motion to, what's the right word? to put
I
forward.
will make
Do you
that motion.
think
I
that's
remain. in
otherwise
that
kind of what it
position.
boils down to for us.
Yeah,
Jason, are you willing to stay in chair?
I'm comfortable with it if that's what the group thinks is the right thing to do.
And I think we need a good article explaining that and explaining what that committee does. And perhaps that will encourage people to participate.
yeah, and we do have
One of these writers.
a good contact with Gentry now for putting things in the Echo, so I can work on that and getting kind of some kind of press release out to her.
Mm-hmm,
That's a great idea.
mm-hmm. I mean, I'm fine staying in chair. Kathy, are you okay with where you're at?
Yeah, I like you two doing it.
I figured you'd say that. I make a motion to continue the officers the way they're sitting.
Okay,
And did we already have Dorothea, did you put that forward as well? We call that a motion in a second.
Oh, I didn't hear Dorothea say that, sorry.
yeah, that didn't come across, but we comfortable with that?
Yeah, I'm
Oh,
fine.
yeah, I think we were kind of in the run of discussion, so.
And there seems to be some delay on the voice.
Yep, I
So,
think we're good with that. So we have a motion on the table in a second.
Johnny, do you want to call the roll?
Kathy,
I,
Dorothea, Nancy,
Aye.
and Jason.
Aye.
Okay. Great. All right, let's get down to business. So, Nancy, I hope you've had a chance to kind of get caught up on the discussion from last week.
I did, or, yeah.
And the applicant came back with revised drawings, revised design based on our discussion from the last meeting. And I'm not going to kind of go through point by point because I think that we kind of discussed this in detail. And the changes that they've made to the design really kind of address all those issues that we talked about at the last meeting. So just in general, I will let Patrick get into the detail, but in general, they've addressed the dumpster issue. They've addressed kind of breaking down the massing of the shed and creating a little bit more dynamic form for the addition, which I think is appropriate relative to the dynamic form of the general store and its other previous additions. I think the material choices are good. And having those two double hung windows on kind of the public face of the gable end is a really nice nod to the historic building. So I don't have a whole lot to kind of put out there for discussion, but I would like to make note of a couple things. I just need to find that window. One of which is the shed. There was a kind of a tough shed structure at the back of the site, which has been talked about being removed or being relocated. And in the current site plan, that's indicated as being a proposed shed. And there are two issues with that that just need to be kind of checked out. One is that I think the size of the shed as indicated puts them over their floor area total, because in Redstone, everything counts towards floor area. And we also would like to see a shed that is more, more designed with intention for the site relative to the historic house, whereas we like to kind of discourage the off-the-shelf shed design. And so that's obviously something that's going to need to come back to us at some point in the future when things actually start happening on the site. I left the floodplain consideration in there just because I haven't seen a survey that has that flood elevation for that site indicated. And I just really, the only reason that we need to see that is to make sure that the floor plane of the addition is actually going to be able to be built at the level that it's currently represented at. Let's see. I think those were the two biggies. The applicant addressed kind of everything else that we talked about. The only conditions that I have remaining in my recommendation for approval are the shed, the more specifics on the windows and skylights, and that can be just kind of delivered to me for the record, and our traditional standard conditions of any changes need to be brought back to us. So in general, I really appreciate the effort that the applicant has put into reworking the design, and I think we've gotten to a really good place, and I'm recommending approval.
Thanks, Susanna. Well, Patrick, do you want to present on your end?
Hang on.
Oh.
I'll wait for the chair to let me know.
Oh, sorry, getting ahead of myself.
I think Jason's, yeah, there he is.
Yep, yeah, I'm here. Yeah, go right ahead. The floor is yours, Patrick. and Lynn.
Okay, cool. Thank you. I just don't want to be too formal, but sometimes I also don't want to go off half-cocked. So for the right, here's the formal Patrick. For the record, Patrick Raleigh, Clausen Raleigh Associates. I'm joined by Lane Calabro of Lane Marie Design as the architect. And briefly, I'm glad you mentioned that. I'll start off with the floodplain question because I wasn't quite sure what we were going to be discussing, but I do have this floodplain map, Susanna, and just like everything else in the village, we're in the 100-year zone AE. But you're specifically looking for a floodplain elevation so that the finished floor of the addition is proud of that elevation?
Yeah,
Okay.
so it's, I think, for insurance purposes, it's required to be 1 foot above the flood elevation on your particular site. And usually whenever you get your improvement survey done, they'll give me a point somewhere in the general vicinity of the addition that gives the flood elevation at that point.
Okay, but Lane, would you have happened to come across that?
I have not seen that, no.
Okay. Well, that may have to be a matter that I respectfully request we could put to a condition for verification at building permit.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Okay.
As long as we don't get bumped up, 3 feet or 4 feet, I think we're.
Right. Okay, so I appreciate it. We'll try to be as brief as possible. Can everybody see? Whoops, why is it doing that? Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we see the floodplain map.
No, you don't see. Okay, I'm trying to do the. Everybody should see the PowerPoint presentation.
You might have to reshare because sometimes it'll just share one window. Yeah. I've had that happen to me before.
No, I'm sorry. Gosh, here we go. Trying to be quick. There. Do you see the splash page of the presentation?
Yes.
Great. So we'll briefly go over this. Lane, I don't, there's probably not too much discussion. So, and everybody would like to get out before 7, obviously. So let's try to go through this with some forward movement. But this is the revised addition, as you saw, from the previous meeting, now with the gable form on the south end and some modifications made to the rear to be more compatible with the historic resource. So an overview of the update, as I just mentioned, a gable roof has been added on that south end to complement the existing gable roof forms. Previously, the addition was viewed to be too simplistic. So now we've introduced some forms from the historic resource into this addition to create some greater interest. A door and a portico have also been added on the back. We will point that out here in a second, but that's also to try to give a little more interest and movement to the rear addition. Again, the door and the portico have kind of riffed on the existing gable roof forms. As we discussed at the previous meeting as being possible, we have certainly repositioned the addition to allow for a 10-foot separation between the historic resource and the proposed addition. As Susanna had pointed out, it's not necessarily a connector element, but there is a 10-foot separation between the newly proposed development and the historic resource, or what is kind of understood as the existing structure. Also, as we discussed at the last meeting, the addition has been shifted to the south to allow for a dumpster area, which will pull the dumpsters away from the front yard where they are quite visible today, and move them to the back. And this addition, or this shift, has also the added benefit of breaking up the northern facade wall length. The guideline is 30 feet, so we will now meet that particular requirement. And by the way, I have discussed the dumpster relocation with our waste removal company, Mountain Waste, and they have provided that the new location should work just fine, as long as the existing driveway is maintained, which it will be. The new customer-facing window on the south gable addition has been replaced with a vertically oriented double-hung windows to be compatible with the historic resource. As Susanna has mentioned, the siding and roofing materials have been updated, modified to be more consistent. And Lane can talk about that later. Some existing wall-mounted mechanical equipment on the northern facade adjacent to the driveway. It's kind of like an air conditioner or air handling unit will be removed and located to another location so that the north elevation will be much cleaner. And then we also updated the schematic tree mitigation plan to kind of accommodate some of these changes. So with that, Lane, why don't you take it over and we can discuss, these model shots and some of the changes that have been made.
Sure, thank you. So that was a pretty good overview, but you can see, well, here on the south perspective, you really get the good view of that kind of customer facing area that became the gable roof. That kind of just speaks a little bit more to the existing structure. I decided to switch the siding up from horizontal to vertical, that board and batten that kind of is at like the ice cream window and that shed on the other side. So it still ties in, but it creates a little bit more interest on this end as well. So just something a little bit nicer for people to be walking up to. And then you can see that door and portico above the door on that east perspective. Thank you, Patrick. Just to kind of create more of a public interest from the back. As we discussed in the last meeting, behind that area behind is used a lot for people, enjoying their ice cream or snacks or whatever, just, enjoying the summer day. And so it's nice to kind of have a good view of the building and it not just to kind of be a back accessory shed, which is how we kind of had it. You can see where the dumpsters are located now on that north perspective and east perspective there. They've been pushed towards the back as Patrick was saying. And we also have plans to remove the swamp cooler that was up where the dumpsters currently exist as well. So that front corner, that north perspective now is going to be much cleaner viewed from the street. We also did switch up the materiality of the gable roof too. We made that a metal roof, whereas the shed roof is still shingled. Yeah, you can see here a little bit more clearly where we created the 10-foot separation and also broke up those two walls on the north as well as the east side that were over 30 feet. And I think it works out a lot better now. You can see the two different roof types here. We eliminated one of the skylights, just keeping them for that back area. That's all there really is to say about that. Here you can see the elevation a little bit. Ties in a little bit better now to the existing than it did before as just the singular shed roof. It's a little bit more interesting now. Get a good view of the dumpsters on that one. Yeah, and then here you can see kind of the front of that new customer facing and how we changed the windows to be vertically oriented to speak more to that existing proud windows on that gable roof that's extending on the left of that northwest elevation below. Just some details about how these are the same details that you guys had last time, just showing how we're trimming out that attachment into the existing historic structure where we're attached just along that wall there. Eve detail showing wood fascia to be painted red to match, showing the trim around the windows that will exist on the shed roof area, but we will not be trimming out the windows on the gable roofed area. Same materials and paint colors as last time, except now we've added the board and batten siding for the gable roof end, as well as that metal roofing that I pointed out.
And here's the updated site plan with the tree mitigation. Again, the large tree one of the large trees then in the back will have to be removed. We've relocated, and it's proposed shed. I'm sorry, that's a missed label that I had. It's the existing shed that has been relocated. And you know, what we are trying to do is snake it to the back of the yard so that it's a little bit less visible. Obviously, it's a very useful, has great utility for the operations and the commercial operations. So you know, it's a useful shed to have. As Susanna has pointed out, it may bust our floor area by 15 square feet. I believe that's the calculations that we have on it. And I think if that's such a small amount, Lane, we can work to get that out of the proposed addition by moving the walls in a slight bit or something like that. Alternatively, we can work on, you know, maybe possibly a different shed in the future and work with the owner in that regard.
Just to clarify, since that shed is existing, doesn't that count as existing floor area? Why is that being considered added to our addition if it's already there?
It's the total floor area on the site.
Okay.
With the addition, the total floor area you go over the allotted amount.
And
Gotcha.
I think it's 15 feet is what I
It's not
calculated.
much.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could certainly shave that off.
So I threw this picture in. We had a discussion at the last meeting about the front parking area, and while it really isn't part of our current proposal, or you know, nor do we have any plans to modify anything in the front, there was some discussion about maybe making it more of a pedestrian friendly zone, though that this area did reflect kind of the vitality and the commercial nature of the general store. And this is a Google Earth screenshot that I took. I think it's from 2021, that shows this, what a wonderful term from the city of Aspen several years ago, many years ago now, was messy vitality. And this is kind of the messy vitality that only Redstone can really provide. And it really is a successful area as it is today. So it's not just an expanse of gravel with parking, but the owners have provided areas for people to sit and enjoy their ice cream. Whenever I'm up there and the weather is nice, I see people sitting in there. So, I think that kind of the status quo is working, and I think it reflects both the commercial nature of the general store and also the vitality that the store brings to Central Redstone. So going through the standards, as Susanna has provided, I believe staff has generally said that we have met most of these standards and also the guidelines. We've broken up the massing and provided a gable volume and created some greater interest. I think that's a positive move. We have preserved, and this is unchanged from before, the existing historic buildings relationship to the boulevard and the town pattern. The addition is in the back, so we're not altering any highly visible features from the boulevard. The revised design does arrange new massing that distinguishes itself from the rest of the building. Through that, though, we're not necessarily mimicking what the historic resource contains, but we are riffing on that and using that as a what's the word I'm looking for? Inspiration for the new forms that we've had. Susanna, you and I are both having issues with finding words today, I guess. It must be in the air. And then finally, the guidelines that are relevant are reviewed later. So with that, I believe we get 3 green check marks that we have met the standards that are applicable. Now, concerning the guidelines, the on-site parking, as I just mentioned, I think the front parking area, it could be formalized. We could look at ways to do some different things, but the front of the store and its messy vitality seems to work, and I think we'd like to try to maintain the status quo. As I also previously mentioned, and I'm sorry, this is a previous version of a PowerPoint. I pulled the wrong one, Lane, and all that work. Anyways, Mountain Waste has accepted the location of the dumpsters, and I think the relocation of these dumpsters to the rear really provides for protection of the historic resource, just makes the front area much nicer. As I just discussed, the relocation of the shed, we've tried to screen it and we've tried to move it into the back, corner of the yard so it's less visible. The 15 square feet, if we are over that, can be clawed back through a modification of the addition. But I think it would be the applicant's desire to maintain that existing shed. Again, as I said, it's very useful to the operations. But if we need to take a look at that, I'd like to do that sometime in the future. And then as far as the hardscaping that we're providing a concrete slab on the south, adjacent to the south facade or adjacent to the new gable end with at the customer window. And again, that's to provide customer comfort and to assist in moving throughout the site. So with that, I think we get 4 green checks. I love it when I get to grade my own work, right? 3.1 is preserving historic integrity. I think we have proposed an addition that's evocative or evokes the historic resource, but it can be distinguished from the rest of the structure nicely. Lane has done a good job with that. The addition is located in the least visible location of the site in the rear. And so we are also, through that location, only attaching to a very small area of a historic part of the structure, and where we're attaching elsewhere is to previous additions that have been made. We have, as I mentioned, removed some of those mechanical add-ons that messed up the northern facade to a less visible location, so that the northern facade will be much cleaner when viewed from the boulevard. And then the other previous additions are left unaltered, essentially, so it'll be kind of an existing condition. The addition, one of the slides that didn't make it into this iteration of the PowerPoint was I wanted to show how that the addition does sit lower from the historic resource. So causing that to be distinguishable from the historic resource, but also secondary to the historic resource. And as we discussed with the northern facade wall and the push and the pull for the dumpster areas, we've broken up that 30-foot wall length to meet the guideline. And then roofs and dormers, the proposed roof elements draw inspiration from the historic resource. The materiality on the southern gable is slightly different to further distinguish it as a building of its own time, but again, maintaining consistency with historic resource materials. The windows and the doors, we've talked about that. We've modified the most visible windows to double hung windows on the customer walk-up window, and that is to meet what is happening on the historic resource. The other less visible windows will be more horizontal as provided as you just saw. The new patio area is that concrete area just to provide for customer comfort and allow access around the property. We don't have any really additional decorative elements, and the elements that we do have, I guess, would not detract from the existing decorative elements on the historic resource. And of course, we're not modifying anything on the historic resource. And then we've talked about this accessory building of the shed. Again, I think we can deal with that. So with that, I would welcome your questions, and we'll try to answer them. And if not, or if there are no questions, we would look forward to getting a motion for an approval with these changes as made.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Thank you, Lane. As we go into questions from the commissioners, I want to echo what Susanna said. Really appreciate the effort to be directly and substantively responsive to the feedback from the last meeting around. It makes a huge difference for sure to be able to move forward.
Well, and likewise, I'd like to thank you for the board's clear and concise feedback. That is also hugely helpful. Susanna was very helpful. So thanks to all for your help and helping us along.
Absolutely. We have good leadership in Susanna. Nancy, Kathy, Dorothea, do you have questions?
I have
I
a
don't have
question.
any questions.
Okay, Kathy, go ahead.
When I was looking at the tree that you're keeping and where the door is to the back shed part, and then you were going to have some kind of fencing around the tree. It looked like it was going to be right up against the door. How does that work?
Well, the fencing that is shown is just tree protection fencing that would be in place during construction activities.
Okay.
That's established at the drip line of the tree, so we're not compacting the soils. And that tree is also rather tall and has been skirted up. It's a spruce tree, so it will largely be out of the way of anybody and also of the structure. It's probably been skirted up that it'll be above the limit of the shed roof on the addition in that location.
Yeah, I didn't understand that the fencing was just during construction.
Yeah.
Good. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Dorothea, do you have any questions? One question that I have, and I'll have to pop up the elevation. It's on the north corner where the dumpsters are and the foundation steps. And the elevations identify a vertical step there. And I'm just curious, how much of that is existing? I know there's steps on the south side coming down from the existing kind of ice cream walk-up window, and the steps go to the east. But is there going to need to be an extension of that foundation wall out into the site in order to achieve that vertical step between the existing and the addition?
It's really more of a gradual slope. I really should have drawn it more that way. You know, we have the steps out of the building, but along the alley, it does slope. So I do not think we'll have to extend the foundation out. The waste management company did request us to just pour a slab on grade there so the dumpsters can roll out to their trucks. But I don't think we'll need to have any sort of foundation wall or retaining wall to, you know, achieve any sort of step there.
Okay. And then as it relates particularly to the gable form structure, the new gable form on the end of the addition, Lane, I heard you mention that the intention is to not trim out the windows on that. Can you talk about that just a little bit?
Yeah, so looking, so this kind of came a roundabout way. Me and Patrick were both kind of looking at some Scandinavian design to kind of create a little bit more, you know, of a separation, and it kind of got carried over from there. And I was noticing too, if you look at the existing window on the ice cream window, it really doesn't have a lot of trim. It kind of just dies into the window. So I mean, that's definitely something up for discussion. If you guys would like to see trim, we could certainly add it. But I thought it was just another detail that kind of separated our gable end section of the structure from the shed roof section.
Got it. And so the same would be the like corner boards or the kind of soffit eave connection there. Okay. And then the other thing I noticed, it looks like I saw there was a call out for a 12-inch kind of eave dimension on the gable. And is it 12 inches on the gable end as well as 12 inches along the eaves in terms of the overhang
Yes.
there? Okay. And do you know what the eave dimension is on the existing building?
I believe I'd have to look back at my notes. I believe it is 12 inches as well, but I can try to look at some stuff and confirm that real quick.
I know that that's a very, very narrow roof profile on the existing building, and so it tends to accentuate some of the dimensions of the overhang because it is tiny. It almost just looks like the roof sheathing was extended and then painted on the other side because it's so thin. And so I was just looking at some of the differentiation, and it goes into that subjective realm of making reference without mimicking, and so it helps to understand that was all done very intentionally, because it stands out to me that especially with the vertical board and bat, that very, very simple wall plane becomes kind of the single largest exposed wall plane from floor elevation up to the kind of the eave point. And, you know, my initial reaction to that is to want to kind of break it down because everything else that's around the existing building are those sloping shed roofs that kind of bring the head height down. You almost have to duck to step up onto the porch to go into the front entry. And I was just kind of trying to, in my mind, my initial reaction was, let's, you know, talk about corner trim. Let's talk about, you know, potentially breaking up the triangular space up in the eaves. I know Susanna hadn't recommended any of that. And, you know, the eave dimension itself, trying to get some shadow line, or do you want to create some shadow above the window to signify that as the walk-up window and get a little bit more of that human scale?
So it's funny that you bring this up because one of the iterations between our last meeting and this meeting, I actually did have kind of that top part of the wall trimmed out and had kind of a shingle in there more to mimic what the front is. But then since Susanna had kind of given us the feedback not to copy and not to mimic, that's where we kind of went more clean lines. That's where kind of the Scandinavian influence came in. And so that was what really drove our decision to kind of keep that materiality the same on that large face, just because we didn't want it to match too closely to the historic.
I think it's clever to have taken the board and bat and put that on the gable and then taken the horizontal and put that on the shed because it flips the character of the existing building. in terms of those gable forms, but then it mimics the additions. And so you've got the board and bat on the additions, and the more hidden form that is the horizontal siding, the channel siding, that's a little bit more hidden away, but it allows you to provide some variety in those two, the materiality of the two new masses. I think all of those things work really well. I guess to me, it's a little bit of a question. If you had your druthers, would you want to see corner trim and some of those kinds of things, or are you feeling like, do you feel strongly that this is the aesthetic that you would like to see out of the building?
Personally, this is the aesthetic that I would like to see. You see that corner trim and kind of those elements on the shed roof portion, and it just kind of continues, you know, what you were saying with the different sidings and things like that. It just goes to kind of separate these elements a little bit more, where they're still kind of talking to each other, but they're not so matchy. I mean, I certainly could be convinced otherwise, but you know, Patrick and I felt that this was the best path forward design wise, based on the feedback that we received last time.
Okay, good. It's helpful to hear your perspective on that. I appreciate that. Does anybody else have questions related to what we've just seen or to the contents of Susanna's memo? No. Seeing none, we would move into public comment, and I didn't see anybody else arrive. Bonnie, do we have any?
We
Public
do
is-
have a Mr. Frank Hill.
Okay.
One second here. Frank, you should have received a request if you have anything to comment on. Try this one. Mr. Hill? He'd been hanging out for a really long time, so I want to make sure he has his opportunity. Mr. Hill, if you have any comments, please unmute. Jason, we have nothing, so
Okay.
go ahead.
All right, that sounds good. And I'm guessing that's Frank and maybe Bev as well. If there's a reason that you're having trouble unmuting when you were given the opportunity, Bonnie, would they be able to type a comment or type a question just to let us know? I'd hate for technical difficulties to.
Yeah, they should be able to give us any message if they'd like to.
Okay. We'll keep moving forward, and Frank and Bev, if you're there as well, if you do have something you'd like to submit, it would usually be down at the bottom in the chat, or submit a comment box.
Yeah,
And,
or try *6 on your phone, possibly. That can also unmute you if you're having any issues.
all right. And so, Bonnie, if something pops up, would you just interrupt us?
Will do.
All right. Thank you so much. All right. Otherwise, we would move into closing the public comment, and at this point, we would have commissioner comments or a motion at this time. And Nancy, you had mentioned that you did not have questions, but did you have comments that you wanted to make?
No, I liked the presentation, and I followed it from the notes, or what Susanna presented online, because I wasn't at the last meeting, and I think that all the points have been met. So that makes me really happy, because I had looked at it really closely the last time, and then I just couldn't. I was not feeling well at all, so I couldn't make the meeting, but I am really glad with everything today.
Yes, go ahead, Dorothea. I think you'll have to unmute on your end. You don't.
Sorry, we can't hear you, Dorothea.
Yeah.
Do you see the little microphone on the upper left-hand side?
And Bonnie, oh,
There-
there we
Okay.
are.
Okay, no, I appreciate your meeting the questions we had last time. They were extensive and I think you've addressed all of them. I have no problem with it. I think it meets the Redstone criteria. So I would be supportive of moving forward.
Kathy, did you have any comments you wanted to add?
No, I don't have any other comments. I like the way it is. Yeah.
It sounds like we're hearing a lot of momentum towards a motion. We would entertain a motion, and I haven't heard any suggestions for conditions yet, but we can, I guess, talk about that once we get a motion on the table. Somebody like to move to approve?
As my last meeting, I will make a motion to approve this improvement in Redstone.
I would second that.
All right, and let's see, I want to make sure that we do this correctly. So we do have an opportunity now again for discussion about the motion, and I want to go back to the staff memo and be super clear that we're talking about approve as recommended by staff. Would that be sufficient, Dorothea?
Yes.
And then we also recognize that this approval is would be absent of any direct approval for the shed, and that would be a follow-up conversation.
Right.
Okay. And Susanna, did we miss anything else that we needed? With the condition, I would like to ask, suggest in addition to the motion that the applicant shall provide window and skylight specifications for the record. So it would be an administrative review by Susanna.
Yeah.
Is that?
We just have our other standard condition, which is any other substantive changes come back to staff for review or forwarding to the board. I think if the floodplain becomes an issue, that would be one of those items that we want to look at and just get a sign off from me, or if it has any real effect, then we'd want to just check back in with the board, but it wouldn't have to be too formal.
I see Dorothea nodding. You're comfortable with those additions?
Yes.
All right.
Those are the conditions that Susanna had recommended. Yeah.
And Susanna, do we need to now restate it, or do we feel like we've got clarity here? I think this one's pretty simple.
Yeah, I think we're okay.
All right. I think we can call the roll.
Dorothea,
Yes.
Jason,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Kathy.
Yes.
All right. The ayes have it. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, all of you. I hope you have a good evening. And Susanna, we'll be talking to you soon, I'm sure.
Good. Thanks
Yeah,
again.
thank you guys very much for your time.
Yep. Thank you.
Talk soon, Lane.
Have a great
Bye-bye.
evening.
Bye-bye.
Great. Great.
Okay. Good.
Good. Just in time for the sun to hit my camera.
I know, right? You got like quite a sundog there.
Yeah.
And that covers all of the official business that we have on the agenda for this evening, correct?
Yep.
And so I think the right way to do it is before we stop recording, would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we.
So moved.
All right, we are officially adjourned. Thank you, everybody. That was very productive.
And I don't
Thank
have
you.
anything kind of in the pipeline at this point, so I'm not sure when we'll be seeing each other.